Please, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. And coming from a city where half the people as well are sick, I can understand why Vadim is not here. I should say, start off by thanking Oleg and Olga for the invitation. I'm very glad to appear here, especially because the work that we've been doing at the Institute for the International Center for the Study of Institutions and Development on policing and economic crime. We've worked a lot with Ella Panayak and Kirill Titayev in Vadim, and we use their work. And there's a special issue of Post-Soviet Affairs coming out on economic crime in Russia that has a bunch of really interesting articles, в том числе an article by Ella Panayak in it. So I wanted to advertise that. This project is is done with three co-authors, Noah Buckley, Scott Gelbach, and Lauren McCarthy. And it is part of our effort to do a field experiment with the Moscow City Police. And we initially thought of this survey as a way to prepare the groundwork for the field experiment with the Moscow City Police, but the enthusiasm of the Moscow City Police for working with us declined over time. And we abandoned that project, but we still have the survey, which we think is quite interesting, and we also wanted to test the arguments that we have in Georgia as well, for reasons I'll talk about. Okay, so we want to frame the talk as, why do citizens cooperate with the state? And we're going to look at the willingness of citizens to report crimes. But we can think about this in the larger context of Marx and Weber and Foucault, and more recent scholarship by Doug North and Margaret Levy on taxation or conscription, where we think of cooperation with the state as an activity that is costly for the citizen to undertake, but produces some larger benefit for society. So in this paper, we're going to look at citizen cooperation with police. And the citizens act as gatekeepers when a crime happens, and they have to make a decision about whether or not to report that activity. And of course, this is an important question, not just in a philosophical realm about state-society relations. It's also important for state capacity, where many studies have shown that citizen cooperation with the police can help the police be more effective. There is some existing literature that looks at the willingness of citizens to report crimes to the police. Most of this is simple survey data where people are asked questions about their willingness to cooperate with the police. And since it's just standard survey questions, we can only get at the correlates of cooperation without talking more deeply about causation, for reasons I'll get into. And most of these studies have been done in countries with relatively effective police forces, the Netherlands, the United States being two prime examples. Our approach is, we're also going to look at citizens' willingness to report crimes to the police, but we're going to use survey experiments where we randomly assign slightly different versions of a question to individual respondents. And what we're going to do is create 4 groups of respondents who look exactly alike on average. So in each group, there'll be just as many women, just as many old people, just as many educated people. And the only difference between these groups is going to be that some were asked one version of a question and some were asked another version of a question. So from this, we can say that any differences in the responses on average in these groups is only due to the change in the question that we ask. Right? So this is a way for us to really isolate the impact of the factor that we're interested in without having to do regressions or any kind of fancy analysis. Because we randomly assign who gets what question, we create 4 identical groups, and the only thing they differ in is the nature of the question that they get. And we're going to vary in the questions the nature of the crime, the perpetrator of the crime, whether it's a police or a citizen, whether reporting is anonymous or not, and how costly it is for people to report, how much time it takes to report. And we're also going to look at Russia and Georgia, 2 countries with some commonalities, but with very different paths of police reform over the last 10 years. Okay. So what are the key findings, to jump to the chase? What matters is the nature of the crime, how severe the crime is. People are more likely to report more severe crimes. And in some cases, the perpetrator of the crime, whether it's the police or a citizen. The other thing that matters is whether or not people can report anonymously. Unfortunately, what doesn't matter are things that are easy for the state to change. Right? Giving a monetary reward doesn't seem to have any effect. Making appeals to civic duty doesn't have any impact. Making it easier for people to report crimes also doesn't seem to have any effect. The other interesting finding is that we find very little differences between Russia and Georgia in people's willingness to report crimes. And if anything, people in Georgia are less willing to report crimes than in Russia. And we'll talk about why that might be. Or maybe you'll give us some ideas about why that is. We were surprised by that finding. Okay. So what are some, we'll move to the theoretical portion of the talk. We can think about what are some motivations for cooperating with the police. Well, one set of motivations is the benefits that you get from cooperating if the crime is solved, right? And these might be material benefits, such as your property gets returned to you. It might be a monetary reward that the police or the person who lost their property give back to you. It also might be non-material benefits. If a crime is solved, it might be that that criminal is taken off the street, there might be more public safety. And what we're going to do in the questions that we ask is we're going to try to manipulate these different benefits and see if they change people's willingness to respond. So this set of benefits are obtained only if the crime is solved. So the respondent's perception of whether or not the police are effective or honest are going to matter a lot here. So what we're going to get is a change. If people believe that their reporting is actually going to make a difference, then we would expect these types of benefits to influence people's willingness to report. So one of our intuitions going in was that people have more trust in the Georgian police than they do in the Russian police. They think the police in Georgia are more effective. So one hypothesis would be that if the crime was solved and the benefits that one would receive if the crime was solved were higher, you'd get more willingness to report. Another set of benefits that come from cooperating are received regardless of whether or not the crime is solved, right? So there might be material benefits, there might be monetary compensation. For example, if you have insurance and you report the crime, you might get some benefit even if the crime is not solved. There also might be some services that are available to you that you would get if you reported the crime. Say you were assaulted and there are some victim services available. There also might be non-material benefits, such as the benefit of having done the right thing. Benefit of civic duty, of saying there was a crime and it's my duty to report it. I reported it, therefore I feel better. And this benefit one gets whether or not the police are effective or not. You just get the benefit from simply reporting. Okay. A third factor that we're going to consider is the cost of cooperation. Right? People are busy, we all know that. And if it takes a lot of time and energy to go report, then people are going to be less likely to report. So, and it's not just the opportunity cost of time in going to report. There's also a very emotional cost that needs to be paid to go and describe what happened, or if you were the victim, to relive what happened. And again, there's also the possibility of reprisal. It's not uncommon for people who go to report crimes on the police in Russia to themselves be accused of committing a crime. It's not, particularly if they're reporting on a crime against the police. Okay, so this is Scott Gelbach's contribution. I should say that Scott Gelbach in this paper does the formal model. Lauren is our expert on the police, and Noah is our expert on data. And I don't know what I'm an expert on in this paper, but I will at least, I played some role, I hope, in how it came about. So this is just a simple analog to the calculus of voting by Riker and Ordashuk, where people receive a payoff of getting benefits from the crime if the crime is reported and if it's solved. And this, so the idea is this is what people are thinking when they're trying to make their decision about whether or not to report a crime. And I'll walk through this just very briefly. So this is up here, this is the benefits that one gets if the crime is solved. R is the rewards that one gets even if it's not solved, and C is just the costs of reporting. So the idea is that each person, when they're trying to make their decision about whether or not to report a crime, they're trying to calculate whether their reporting of the crime will help it get solved, and what are the benefits of costs of doing so up top, and what are the benefits and costs of not reporting a crime. Because ideally, you would like the crime to be solved without you having to go and pay the cost. You'd like the police to resolve it themselves. Then you get the benefit from seeing the crime solved without having to pay the cost of actually going and reporting on it. So this is where we don't have to walk through this math, but let me just give you a simple example of why the survey experiments are a useful way, a more useful way than just doing regression analysis with a normal survey. So the idea is, what we would like to see is, I'll pick on Olga, right? So let's say Olga is in a situation where there's a lot of benefits from reporting to the police. It's a high probability that the crime is going to be solved, and it's very easy to do so, right? In the real world, when we do a survey and we ask Olga the question, we get a response, right? And in this case, when Olga's in this happy world where there's lots of benefits and the costs of reporting are low, she says, yes, I'll report the crime, right? The problem is that the same factors for why Olga is in this happy land where the costs of reporting are low and the benefits to solving the crime are high might be the very same reasons why she's willing to report in the first place. So let's say there's just a social norm out there that we should report crimes, right? That could also make it less costly to report crimes. And that could also increase the benefits of reporting, right? So we could do a survey where we ask Olga, would you report this crime if you saw it? And she's in this situation where the benefits are all good. And she says, yes, I'd report the crime. We risk not being able to uncover a third factor that's correlated with the reasons why she's in this happy land and why she's willing to report. So ideally, what we would want is to take Olga and put her in a situation where the benefits to cooperation are low and the costs of reporting are high, and then see how she behaves, right? But we can't do that in a normal survey, right? So one way to do this is to do these survey-based experiments where we're basically creating 4 Olgas, right? Because on average, each of the respondents look alike in these 4 groups, and we're manipulating the costs and benefits of reporting. And this has the added advantage of making it very easy to present the results. So there will be no regression tables here with lots of stars and small numbers and all that, okay? So very, very easy. Okay, so that's the strategy. Now let's turn to the empirics. So why Russia and why Georgia? Each has a Soviet legacy. We can debate whether the legacy is common between Russia and Georgia. They имеют свои специфики, конечно. But police culture probably has something in common. Both countries, there's lots of reliance on informal practices to resolve бытовые проблемы. In Russia, we have what I think most people would agree has been a fairly ineffective police reform, with rebranding going on, changing uniforms, changing the name of the police, having very modest salary increases, and also going through a recertification process, which some people have argued had the effect of weeding out some of the better police and keeping some of the less strong police. And in our survey that I'll talk about in a minute, we find that trust in the police is far lower than we see in Georgia, where police reform has been much more far-reaching. You know, everyone knows about the transparent buildings that the Ministry of Internal Affairs have on the regional level in Georgia. Huge turnover of, I think of the 25,000 people in the Georgian MVD, 16,000 were replaced within 2 years. Very large salary increases, and our survey suggests, and other surveys suggest, that there's much higher trust in the police in Georgia than in Russia. So one of our expectations that there'll be lower costs of cooperation in Georgia, and a stronger belief that reporting a crime will actually make a difference, right? Okay, so we did 2 surveys. One actually we did 3 surveys. We did a survey first in Moscow in December 2011, which produced fairly similar results. And then we repeated it in December 2012 using the Levada Center. We basically added questions to the Courier survey and nationally representative sample. And then we repeated the survey in Georgia in June 2013. This was funded by the Higher School of Economics as part of our grant, so we had to go through the Goszakupki process for both of these, and it turned out that the Levada Center won the first time and Psion won the second time. So that's why we used 2 different survey organizations. But we tried to keep the surveys as similar as we could. One interesting difference is that the response rate was significantly lower in Georgia than in Russia. We've never been able to really figure out why, but it doesn't seem to have a strong bias on the responses. Okay, so let's get to the fun part. These are the questions that we randomly assigned to these 1,600 individuals. So in each of the 4 groups, we have about well, in theory, around 400 people who were asked each of these 4 questions. So here we want to manipulate the identity of the perpetrator of the crime and the severity of the crime. So the first question, the first group received this question: suppose you saw a police officer taking a wallet and a mobile phone from a drunkard lying near a bus stop. Would you report this to the police? Certainly not, probably not, maybe not, probably not, certainly. Suppose you saw a police officer beating a defenseless person. Right? Then we asked the same question, but rather than ask about a police officer, we asked about someone taking a wallet and mobile phone from a drunkard lying near a bus stop, and then we asked about someone beating a defenseless person. So here the idea is that beating somebody is a much more severe crime than just taking their mobile phone and their wallet. Now, these are hypothetical questions. We can't tell you whether or not people would actually behave this way in the real world. However, there are real ethical and feasibility questions to doing a field experiment where we got persuaded the police to randomly beat up people, and then, or to steal their wallets and mobile phones. These are not things that are subject easily to real field experiments. So the best we can do are these types of hypothetical questions. Okay. Although there was one study in the US where they had people answer questions of a survey about their willingness to report a crime. And then as part of their reward for doing the survey, they had them go to a store. And while they were in the store, they had somebody engage in shoplifting. And about 80% of the people who said they would report a crime actually reported the crime when they actually saw one, for what it's worth. Okay, so to analyze these questions, so this is in the Russia sample, and these are the responses on this 5-point scale between the question who was asked about the police officer stealing a mobile phone. This was the response on this 5-point scale of what people said about whether or not they would be willing to report the crime. And this is the comparison between a police officer stealing a mobile phone, and this is the response when people were asked about whether the police officer beat the person lying on the street. And we see a very large and statistically significant difference in people's willingness to report. And the same is true in the stranger scenario. So here, what this tells us is that people's willingness to report crimes is really driven by the severity of the crimes. And to a lesser degree, the people are more willing to report the crime in Russia if it's done by a stranger than if it's done by a police. So about 23 percentage points higher is the score when people are asked about a stranger beating up somebody lying defenseless on the street versus the police. Okay? These are the results in Georgia. And again, we see that the severity of the crime has the severity of the crime has a big difference between the two groups. Right? So a 32 percentage point increase when people are told that the police officer was beating rather than just stealing something from somebody. And the same thing is true for a stranger. Interestingly, in Georgia, we saw no difference in the willingness to report whether it was a police officer or a stranger. So this might be that people are less afraid of the police and are more willing to report. Now, what's interesting is if we look here, though, is that the mean response is much higher in Russia than in Georgia when people are asked about the police. So on average, people in Russia are more likely to report that they're willing to report a crime than they are in Georgia, which was a surprise for us. And we can talk about why that might be, because that's a result that will be consistent across almost all of the scenarios. Okay? Here's the second survey experiment, and here we're going to vary whether or not reporting is allowed anonymously, which is not allowed in Russia yet, that you could report crimes. In Georgia, there was legislation recently passed that allowed anonymous reporting for some types of crimes. And also the perpetrator identity, whether or not it was a police officer or a stranger that committed a crime. So here we asked, if you knew about a crime that had committed by a police officer and it was not necessary to leave your personal information to report this crime. That was one set of questions. The second question that we asked is the exact same question, except here we said if it was the first question we asked if it was not necessary to leave your personal information. The second question we asked was if it was necessary to leave your personal information to report a crime. And again, we did the same thing. If you knew about a crime that had been committed by a stranger and it was not necessary to leave your personal information, and then if you knew about a crime that had been committed by a stranger and it was necessary to leave your personal information, would you report this crime? So again, the same thing, we're trying to isolate the impact of the anonymity of reporting, and the identity of the perpetrator in these questions. And stop me if this is not clear at all, because we're going to go through this a couple of more times. So here, again, we see that there's a big difference in the anonymity of reporting. So here, when people are told that they have to leave their personal information, they're about 43 percentage points less likely to say that they would be willing to report than if they could leave the information without having to, if they could report the crime without leaving their personal information. And we find the same thing with the stranger condition as well. So whether or not the perpetrator is a police officer or a stranger, we see that anonymity, giving people the possibility to report anonymously, has a very large and statistically significant impact on willingness to report a crime. Here, the nature of the identity of the perpetrator has no real impact, right? It's almost the same number when people know about a crime committed by a police officer versus a stranger. And again, down here as well, we see no significant difference. So here, the identity of the perpetrator has no impact, but the willingness or the ability to report anonymously has a big impact. In Georgia, we see that the results are much weaker. Although when people are told that they'd seen a stranger committing a crime and they have the opportunity to report anonymously, again we see a significant decline in the willingness to report. With the police, we see a much smaller drop, and this drop is not statistically significant. But again, as we'll see in this next slide, the group mean for anonymous reporting in Russia is much higher than it is in Georgia. So on average, people in Russia report that they're more willing to report crimes than in Georgia. Okay? Is this making sense? I want to be sure. No? Yes? No?
It's a puzzle.
Well, yeah, the results are puzzling. I want to be sure that people understand why we're doing what we're doing and what the results are, and then we can debate about what the puzzle is. Okay. So then here we want to see if you can motivate people to report crimes by giving them money or by appealing to their civic duty, right? So we asked people, if you knew about a crime that had been committed, would you be willing to report it? So that's the kind of baseline condition. No promise of money, no appeal to civic duty. Then we told people, many people consider that it is their civic duty to report to the police if they have information about a crime that has been committed. If you knew about a crime that had been committed, would you be willing to report it? So we're trying to remind people that there's a civic duty here, and we'll see whether or not that changes results relative to the people who got the question without an appeal to civic duty. Then we said to the third group, imagine that there was a reward of 100,000 rubles or 500,000 lari for information leading to arrest of a criminal. If you possess such information, would you be willing to report it? And then we put them together, right? Many people consider it their civic duty to report to the police if they have information about a crime that is committed. And also imagine that there is a reward. So here we're giving two incentives, appeal to civic duty and promising people money. Would you be willing to report it to the police? Okay? And here we see no effect, right? We see that this is the baseline where there's no reward and there's no appeal to civic duty. And here is where we're promising a reward, and basically the response is no different from the baseline condition. Here, when we appeal to civic duty, we get even a slightly lower response, but again, not significantly different. And over here, where we tell people, hey, there's a reward for reporting, and it's your civic duty to report, we get no effect whatsoever. So this is a very sad result, because these are the kinds of things that you could imagine a police force being able to change quickly, but it doesn't seem to have any impact. And again, in Georgia, interestingly enough, this is the baseline condition with no reward and no civic duty frame. But giving people a reward actually reduces people's willingness to report crimes, right? So this is a Pavlik-Morozov kind of effect. And that this is also something that we see in blood donations, where studies have been done where if you pay people for giving blood, versus just tell people that blood drives are a good thing, they help people, it's your duty as a citizen to give blood. The civic duty appeals are much stronger than the monetary rewards. So we see in Georgia that there's a strong norm against paying people to report crimes. And even the appeal to civic duty also reduced people's willingness to report crimes. Okay? Okay, and again we see this. Okay, so here is the last set of survey experiments that we did, and here we're going to vary the severity of the crime and the opportunity cost of reporting. And here we're not going to ask about you witnessing a crime. We're going to ask about you being the victim of a crime. So about your own personal response if you were the victim of a crime. So we say, suppose some robbers broke into your apartment and stole some not very valuable items, and suppose that reporting this crime to the police would take about 2 hours. Would you be willing to report this crime? The second group, we said, suppose some robbers broke into your apartment and stole some not very valuable items, but it would take about 6 hours to report this crime to the police. Then again, we said some robbers broke into your apartment and stole some very valuable items, and it would take about 2 hours to report. And some robbers broke into your apartment and stole some very valuable items, and it would take about 6 hours to report. So here we're varying the opportunity cost of reporting and also the severity of the crime. What we see is that varying the time from 2 hours to 6 hours has no impact on people's willingness to report. None at all. Whether it's a low-value robbery or a high-value robbery. Right? And in some ways, the non-results that we're getting, we can be more confident that they're non-results because we're using survey experiments where we can't monkey around with the regression to try to get the results that we want. This should be a very strict test, so we can be more confident that there's a null result than if we were just doing a normal survey. And as in most studies about crime reporting, there's a big increase in reporting if it's a low value versus a high value. In both of the instances here, if people have something of high value stolen, they're much more likely to report it than it's of low value. And we see the same results in Georgia, right? Manipulating the opportunity cost of reporting has no effect in both cases, but manipulating the value of the robbery has a big impact in both cases. Now, it could be that if we made this 8 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours, we might have gotten a result. But we thought 2 hours and 6 hours was something that was within, a plausible range. Okay. What matters is the nature of the crime, whether it's a severe crime or not. And in some cases, the perpetrator of the crime matters, whether a police officer commits the crime or whether a citizen commits the crime. And anonymity of reporting also seems to have a big impact on people's willingness to report. And what doesn't matter, apparently, is appeals to monetary reward, appeals to civic duty, the opportunity cost of reporting, and surprisingly, the institutional context doesn't seem to matter. And then in Georgia, in every of the 4 conditions, we see that people are just much less willing to report. Now, why might that be in the Georgia case? Well, it could be that the Georgian police reform, the miracle of the Georgian police reform, is more PR than actual change. But if that were true, we wouldn't see significantly higher levels of trust and satisfaction with the police in Georgia than we do in Russia. So it could be that people just have different different sources of reasoning when they think about trusting the police and their willingness to report crimes. It could just be that these are 2 processes that are going on in their heads and they're not really linked. It could also be that trust is not related to cooperation with the police. For example, Kathy Henley has done this very nice study of business people's trust in courts and their willingness to use courts, and she finds that there's no difference. People who trust courts are just as likely to use them as people who don't trust courts. So, in part because they're using the courts for reasons other than trust. A third reason why that we could just see lower levels of reporting in Georgia, it might be that the starting point for cooperation with the police in Georgia prior to the reform was just much, much lower. Right? So if we had done this survey in Georgia in 2004, it could have been that cooperation with the police would have been even lower, and that the reforms actually increased the level of cooperation with the police in Georgia. But it's really just an effect of starting from a very low base. A final reason why it might be reporting to the police might be lower in Georgia is they might have other mechanisms for resolving disputes informally through other types of social relations that are maybe not available in Russia given the structure of Georgian society in Russian society. Anyway, it was a puzzling result to us. But these are some ways that we've begun to think about it. So what are some implications for theories about the state and promoting cooperation with the state? Well, one is it's really hard. You can't do very short-term changes and expect people to change their behavior relative to the police. So that the explanations we get for how cooperation with the state evolves, probably it's a very long-term process that is based on a lot of factors that might be even beyond the control of the police themselves. So, on that note, we'll end, and I'll be glad to take any questions on any part of the study, on the theoretical part, on the empirical part, on the implications. So thank you very much for your attention.